This video is brought to you by Squarespace. How do you make your 40k models unique? Do you have all your guys pointing a little bit to the left? Or maybe some head swaps? No. The best way to have unique 40k models is to not use 40k models. Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to EonsBattle. Warhammer 40k has about 1,000 unique models available to take in any given game of Warhammer 40k. You would think that's plenty, but it runs out pretty quick. Boil that down into about 50 unique units per faction, then further down into 20 or so models you like the look of and want to take in a game. And all of a sudden, how much choice is there really? Now the great thing about this hobby is it's all about creativity. You can get jiggy with it. Maybe take some Necromunda gangs as Chaos Cultists or Imperial Guard, using regular Space Marines in place of Chaos Space Marines to reflect a less zealous Renegade warband. There is a lot you can do, but still, if you're only looking at the 40k catalog, the options are limited. But if you include Age of Sigmar models in with the normal 40k, you can create some really unique models, and I have done just that. Sort of. I've done a little digital kit bashing to see if some ideas I've had kicking around in my brain are good or not. The first AOS 40k combination I thought of was some Stormcast Eternals mixed with a little bit of Space Marine, because for some reason, those two groups of models seem to look very similar. I'm sure there's absolutely nothing behind that. But a model that really jumped out to me from Age of Sigmar that would work perfectly for 40k was the Knight Relictor. In a way, it's kind of the chaplains of the Stormcast Eternals. The Knight Relictors guard the souls of the Stormcast Eternals, and they also burn the bones of like champions and saints, and the smell that's created or the fumes that are created by burning of these bones does like some weird stuff to the enemy that like demoralizes them and makes it harder for them to accomplish their missions. Although the knights don't actually enjoy doing this, and they only do it from the request of Sigmar. Kind of the thing of the Stormcast is their tragedy is that the Stormcast is kind of a messed up thing, grabbing the soul of a hero and then putting them into a somewhat immortal body to constantly be fighting against the forces of Nagash. And so that's kind of what makes the Stormcast cool, arguably cooler than Space Marines. But what this model made me think of, this model, it'd be a little bit tricky to kit bash because the arms are attached to the torso, so you have to do a little bit of sawing. But that little bit of sawing I think would be worth it, because something that this model reminds me of is a Space Marine Librarian. The Librarian has had tons and tons of different kits over the years, both plastic and resin, and a few metal. I don't know if I would suggest kit bashing the metal arms onto a Stormcast model, because the Stormcast are probably way too big, or the metal models are way too small. But I just had this idea in my head. Stormcast parts on a Space Marine body, what kind of super interesting knightly Space Marine would this give me? And it turned into the Librarian and Artificer armor. Yes, I think it looks really, really nice actually. And I think this would work particularly well for Space Marine chapters like the Black Templar, Dark Angels, or maybe probably Blood Angels, where that shapely, more sculpted armor would look a little bit more appropriate. I mean, some chapters are a little bit more tactical, like the Raven Guard, and so they probably wouldn't look as nice, but for chapters that really, really harken back to those medieval Space Marine times, I think that using Stormcast parts would look really nice. I also snuck the Relictor's mace onto the backpack of the Librarian, just to keep a little bit more of that Age of Sigmar model present in the final design. Also, the Stormcast Comet, or actually the Thunderstrike Comet, that is kind of a new motif going on with a lot of the Stormcast models, looks a lot like the weird glyphs that happen on Librarian Force Weapons. The Librarian Force Weapons are really, really cool because they have that little squiggle, and it looks a lot like the little squiggly lines coming off of the Thunderstrike Comet. So yeah, I think Stormcast parts work perfectly on Space Marines. And I have one more example of that, although I promise just one more, then there'll be some other stuff going on. Another model that jumped out to me from the Age of Sigmar range that would work really, really well in 40k was the easy to build Astarion Soulbright Lord Arcanum. The Lord Arcanums are the big heroes of the Stormcast, and the easy to build one is really, really interesting. It's an easy to build Lord Arcanum riding a Celestial Dracoline. And the great thing about this kit, you'd assume since it's easy to build that like the legs and the Dracoline would be completely fused together. That is actually not true. The rider and the creature are completely separate, and that leaves the door super open to kit bashing and converting. And so something I think would be really cool, a lot of Space Marine chapters get tons and tons of love, like Ultramarines and Black Templar and Blood Angels, and some really, really don't. And the Salamanders are a very popular chapter that never really gets any attention. And I think one thing that could make your Salamanders really, really stand out is taking something like a Primaris Outrider squad, which is Space Marines on bikes, and instead of using bikes, use the Dracolines as their mounts. This would work perfectly because the Salamanders come from a planet called Nocturne, which is populated by humongous lava salamanders, who have never really been described in any novel, but I could totally imagine that the fire salamanders could look, or they probably just would look like the Dracolines. Like these guys, I mean, they have big, thick scales, you color them a little bit darker, and all of a sudden, I think that these could be perfect salamander riders. And holy cow, would your army pop on the table if your Primaris Outriders were all riding these giant cat, dinosaur, dragon monsters. I just love how that looks. I actually, when I photo bashed this model together, I actually used a body from the Assault Marines, or not the Assault Marines, the Assault Intercessor box, because the Outriders, the way that they sit on their bikes is actually fairly static. And so I was able to find a Marine in a little bit more of a dynamic pose in the Assault Intercessor box. But yeah, the Dracoline. And since it's easy to build kit, it's actually not crazy expensive. I really, really wish that you could take like a Captain on Bike. You can take a Captain on Bike, but it's a Legends model for regular Space Marines. There's no Primaris Captain on Bike yet. I would hope that that's coming, but it definitely hasn't arrived yet. Although you could do a Chaplain on Bike, and a Salamander's Chaplain riding a Dracolin or Fire Salamander would look absolutely dope. And you know what else is dope? That's right, shapes. Now triangles are very strong and circles overrated in my opinion, but you know what shape is always there for you? That's right, squares. And no one knows the power of squares more than our sponsor, Squarespace. Whether it's using squares to contain your unique images and present them to the world in your very own professional looking website, or to host four-cornered links to all your favorite social medias like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, Squarespace has you covered. With the full might of 4 equidistant points connected by powerful, unbroken lines, you too can include calendars to let your clients know what openings you have and host it all neatly and cleanly so you can keep all of your new appointments squared away. Squarespace is known for being the easiest website builder, fair and square. So head on over to Squarespace for a free trial, and when you're ready to rock and roll, use the code EonsOfBattle to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. But enough of the filthy loyalists. Another model that caught my eye was the Exalted Deathbringer. This guy is a truly monopose model, so his arms are attached to his body. The easiest thing to do would be a head swap because the head is actually a separate piece, but everything else you're gonna have to get a little bit fancy with knives, saws, and green stuff. But this is a really, really cool model. The Exalted Deathbringer, not to be confused with the regular Deathbringer. These guys are just slightly under Lords of Khorne. And since the Lords of Khorne, there's a fairly fast turnover because all they do is war, like even more so than the other Chaos Gods. So every time there's a death in the family and they need to get a new Lord, they look at the Exalted Deathbringers and they promote from within. It's a really, really good business model that Khorne has going. This model absolutely rocks. And that's not something that I can say for the current Chaos Lord on offer. There's been a lot of Chaos Lords for Warhammer 40k over the years, many of them in resin, plastic, and pewter. And this Chaos Lord that is like the Chaos Lord that you can buy right now is from Blackstone Fortress, and he looks decent, he looks good. And I mean, if you're running this guy in a Khorne army, he's really not gonna have the presence of he is the biggest and the baddest and the meanest guy in charge. I mean, Khorne is very orcish, and you want your leader to be the biggest guy with the biggest weapon and just the most crazy stuff going on. And so I think that if you kit bash parts from the regular Chaos Space Marines onto this model, it becomes a really cool, interesting, imposing character. Not even necessarily a Space Marine. I mean, I've put Space Marine shoulder pads. Space Marine shoulder pads, Space Marine helmet, I think that does everything you need it to. I think, and this guy looks physically shredded enough that I don't think he needs a power plant to keep all of his, the parts of his suit operating. Like, I like to think the bionics inside of his Space Marine glove are literally just powered by like the super gym bro energy this guy is giving off. Also the axe is sweet. I love all of these little things that Games Workshop does, particularly on these monopose models, because they have a little bit more freedom of sculpture, because they don't have to think about like, where is a person going to glue this thing on? And so you've got the little tassel on the belt pointed in one direction, you've got the arm pointed in one direction, and then you've got the top knot tassel pointed in one direction. And it just, those sorts of like parallel lines really, really make me like a model. It feels very artistic. And art is the thing that drew me to this super buff corn guy. I absolutely love it. But yeah, this guy would be a warp-touched Chaos Lord. Like, big, huge exclamation mark on warp-touched, because he doesn't even need his Space Marine armor. He's got muscles on muscles for days. And speaking of muscly muscles, let's talk about bones, specifically the Boner Boys and the Mortek Crawler. This model is a really, really cool looking model. And fun fact, if you're ever assembling a Mortek Crawler for the Boner Boys, if you don't glue on the pivot point of the arm, the catapult arm, it actually does function as a real catapult, and you can put dice or a little model and absolutely fling them across the table. That is really fun. I also love how gruesome and grotesque this model is. I hadn't taken a super close look at it, but I always just imagine it had like a bunch of centipede legs, but it doesn't have centipede legs. It has like a collection of normal hands and normal feet, but it just has too many of them. And it's really creepy and awful and weird, and I really like it. But I think that this model would work particularly well for Necrons. Necrons are a tricky army to kitbash for because things can really quickly not look Necron-y. And I think that the bones certainly help make this look Necron-y, but I would understand if somebody said that this model was not very Necron-y, because in general, it's not, except for if it was part of Drazik's empire amongst the Ghoul Stars. The Ghoul Stars are where all of the flayed ones hang out in between just popping into reality to wreak havoc onto battlefield. And Drazak is, I think he's considered the Mad King, although he's not actually mad. He hasn't succumbed to the Flayer virus or the Destroyer cult. He's essentially a normal Necron who's just decided to live amongst the like deranged faction of the Necrons. And if all of these flayed ones and rusty destroyers and all of these characters all got together, I think that taking a Doomsday Arc inside of the Mortek Crawler, just covered in blood splatter with radiating red heat, would be amazing. A lot of the Boner Boys models would look really, really good converted into some bloody, disgusting Necrons. And I think that that would be really, really cool. I have a fairly large Necron army, but it would be really, really fun just to go really hard into a concept like this. It would be really, really neat. I had to Photoshop away all of the Boner Boys so that I could replace them with some flayed ones. But yeah, just imagine a flayed ones carrying bombs in their Edward Scissorhands. It'd be really fun. Speaking of really fun, the Mortek Crawler actually has 3 types of ammunition that it could launch. It can launch jars of restless spirits that crash into the enemy, and then those restless spirits haunt them. They have a giant boulder that's cursed, and so the boulder lands and then things just get set on fire. And it has bundles of skulls that are imbued with bad vibes. So whatever these skulls land on, immediately they are completely demoralized because of these skulls. And I just think that's super fun. So I think that when this is turned into a Doomsday Arc, that those ammunition types are also loaded in the Doomsday Arc canon. The Doom canon, if you will. But not to be confused with the Doom Gun or the Doom cannon from Doom. This is a Doomsday Arc Doom cannon that fires bad vibe skulls. Next up, I was taking a look at the Daughters of Kane, and specifically the Life Takers. The Life Takers are the flying Daughters of Kane. Daughters of Kane, of course, are like demon-touched elves. That doesn't mean that they're demonic. Well, they're not demonic, but they're not like a demon of Tzeentch or Nurgle or Khorne. They're more just an elf plus evil. And they're really, really fun. They're the winged children of Morathi, her vengeance given flight. It's a dual kit that allows you to build the masked spear Life Takers, and you can also build the regular Life Takers who come with a giant sickle and a shield. These models are really, really great, and one of the things that makes them really nice is their connection point with the ground. A lot of winged models for 40k, a lot of like single model flyers are usually clear flying stem or the even more awful curved flying stem that like you glue onto the butt of the model to make them fly. These models have a really, really nice connection where the tail comes down and touches a piece of the base. And that gives you a really, really strong connection point without having to worry about what you're gonna do with the horrible glossy Lego lightsaber with a big bubble in it that the normal Games Workshop flying stands are. Also, these wings are very clean. They're probably the cleanest wings you're gonna get. Other Games Workshop models that have nice wings are maybe the Furies from the Dark Eldar, although you get a lot of different types of wings in those boxes. And the Tyrannid Gargoyles are another popular choice to get wings. The only problem is that the Gargoyle wings have 2 connection points, so you actually have to shave them down a little bit if you don't want to use both of those. These wings come right down into 2 points that glue perfectly onto shoulders. And I think that they would glue perfectly onto some Crude. Yes, Crude. Crude totally could have wings and fly. If they had a particularly successful Crude shaper who really knew his stuff and he made a perfect feast for his Crude minions to feed on, they could totally grow wings. And also, this is something that I kind of do want to make because I have a burgeoning Crude army and I'm going to need to do some heavy converting to get some other units out of my Crude because really there's only like 4 Crude units and none of them fly. So I think that using the Life Takers, the Daughters of Kane Life Takers, wings and tails would work perfectly for some flying Crudes. These would probably count as Vespid units. Also, the Crude are fairly large, so I think that these fairly large wings would look nice and look appropriate to be able to support the Crude in flight. After winged Crude, I started to think about, is there anything for Age of Sigmar that would work for the Tyranids? Because the Tyranids are very, very specific. They're so specific that a lot of people don't like how Tyranids look. They really prefer more of like a StarCraft slugs that spit acid as opposed to like dinosaurs who are kind of holding fleshy guns. But I thought, wouldn't it be great if the Tyrannid, because the Tyrannid can create new things on the fly in order to win battles. Like if they need a little bit of air superiority, they will just generate the flyers in the form of the Tyrannid Harpies. Or if they really need to like have a lot of strong units, they'll just generate Hive Guard, which are like walking tanks. And so if the Tyrannid came across a situation where they needed to completely demoralize a human enemy, what options could there possibly be for modeling? And I think that the Crypt Ghouls would be perfect. They're a similar size. The Crypt Ghouls are a little bit smaller, but I think that actually works really well. And they're also standing on 25mm base, just like the Tyrannid Termagants. And their hunchback look actually means that the arms of the Tyrannid line up really, really nicely on the figure. And so, I can just imagine the Imperial Guard are actually doing a really, really good job of holding out against the evil Tyrannids. And all of a sudden, everything kind of goes quiet. And they're like, oh, did we win? Have we got them on the run? Are the Tyrannids going to retreat off of this planet? And then all of a sudden, every like fallen Imperial Guard during that battle just starts to walk towards the base because they've all been infected with some sort of a Tyrannid parasite that has turned them into essentially a Tyrannid Termagant, but using the body of a fallen Imperial citizen or Imperial Guard. And so now they have to fight against like zombies that are shooting the the Tyranid living bullets at them. It's like a super creepy, super gross, super macabre thing, but it would work so well. I wonder if there is a Black Library book that kind of equates the Tyranids to zombies. Pretty much every popular science fiction like series has that. Star Wars has a really great book called Dark Harvest where they're stormtrooper zombies. And so I would love to see, or just to build, some crypt horrors holding the Tyranid guns, ready to rock and roll. It's just so much fun when like the kits just line up perfectly. Like that is an easy kit bash, and I think it is super, super successful. And speaking of kit bashes that are super, super successful, I can't take credit for this last kit bash because this one is actually created in real life by a builder called Green Goblin Studios. This is a combination of the Dawn Rioters for the Lumineth Realm Lords, which are elves on horses, which means that they are the bestest of the bestest swordsmen and horse riders and pointy ears. Sometimes the elves and things can feel a little bit boring because all they are is just really, really good humans at doing everything. But one thing that they are really good at is having some really, really good looking horses. And the Sisters of Battle bodies fit really, really well onto the Lumineth Realm Lord Dawn Rider horses. It looks really, really seamless. Also, they went through all the trouble of carving off all of the little Lumineth Realm Lord symbols. And all in all, these models are unbelievably cool looking. They look like an official Games Workshop model, which I hope they become an official Games Workshop model because there's no unit that this perfectly replicates for the Sisters of Battle. I mean, the Sisters of Battle have their Paragon war suits that stand on 50mm bases, and they also have a couple of elite units, but they all stand on 32mm bases, where these models fit a little bit more comfortably on 40mm bases. Or probably they could fit really nicely on the 60x32mm oval bases. But they look so good. Just ripping off those filthy elf bodies and gluing on some badass Sisters of Battle. I really love the look of that idea. It is so good. Green Goblin Studios has named this project the Riders of the Veil. And once again, I have a burgeoning Sisters of Battle army. And even though this is not a unit that exists in the game, and I don't know what unit for the Sisters of Battle that this would actually operate as, I think it would be really, really cool. Just in terms of the looks and the table presence, these models are amazing. Those are some ideas of what can be done with a little imagination. There are 1,000 40K models to choose from, and as of today, 666 Age of Sigmar models. I counted, which is a little bit weird. I'm sure that'll no longer be true in a day or two after one more model gets added to the catalog. But hey, if you're looking for doing something really unique for your 40K armies, maybe give Age of Sigmar a look and bump up that pool of available miniatures from 1,000 to 1,666. Also, let me know in the comments below which one of the theoretical models I showed off do you find the most interesting. I'll read all the comments, and whichever one gets the most mentions, I'll build and paint up that model or unit for real in another video. I hope you liked this video, and as always, thanks for watching.